For our first event, I'm joined today with Rebecca Dent, high-performance dietitian who has worked with Olympic athletes for Great Britain and the British Ski Academy, coaching and supporting athletes of all levels. Today, she is with us to talk about fueling for trail running and specifically racing, now that we're well within the summer race season. So welcome, Rebecca, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
First of all, I think the best place to start is what mistakes we're making. Let's see if we can try and address these rumours, old wives' tales, and the errors that are so common in trail running and specifically racing.
Yeah, I think for ultra runners and trail runners, what I see and experience with some of the athletes I work with is that some of the common mistakes that are made is that simply runners aren't practicing race nutrition strategies. They're either not practicing them enough or not practicing them at all, leading into a race. Some of the other kind of common mistakes you'll find are that people are waiting till they're hungry in a race, starting off too quickly in a race. So if you're setting off too fast, you're going to be using up more energy, so you're going to tire quicker, and it's just going to be harder for you to fuel your efforts during a race. Some of the other kind of common mistakes are people overdrink or underdrink, or people are consuming too many sports nutrition products, things like gels, bars, powders, sports drinks, and it's not that they're not to be used within a race, but again, people aren't having a strategy to when to use those strategically in a race, and also just haven't practiced using them. So again, more likely to lead to stomach upsets and stomach issues whilst running in a race.
Okay, so what would be your top 3 tips when it comes to race nutrition specifically?
Yeah, so my first top tip would be practice your race nutrition strategy specific to the race that you're going to be running in. And it's practice, practice, practice. Just doing one practice in your final long run before the race isn't quite going to be enough. Again, we need to get our stomach used to eating on the go, and you need to have a plan of when you're going to eat and what you're going to eat. So again, practice your race nutrition strategies in training within the last 6 weeks leading up to your training, and then using the foods that you're going to and fluids that you're going to be eating and drinking specifically during that race. The second tip would be that actually during training we can actually get our stomachs and our guts used to eating carbohydrate foods on the go. So again, practice carbohydrate gut training strategies, and then also getting used to just drinking on the go as well. So again, just getting used to your stomach having food and fluid within it. And there's also some great gut training strategies that you can use during your training sessions that can actually help alleviate or manage some common stomach issues that people do occur during a race. And then the third one is really that just as important is get used to your own hydration and sodium requirements during a race.
So you talked about what you're eating during a race, whether it's gels, bars, sorts of food. So what would you recommend as your fuel for an ultra when you're running for over 42 kilometers with hours on your feet? What would you recommend people are eating?
Yeah, so we've seen elite ultra runners, so the faster finishers, tend to eat the most food, and those that also are finishing the race, so the rest of the pack, again are eating more calories and are drinking to the minimum recommended fluid intake per hour. So the recommendations that I would provide and that are kind of your standard guidelines are to consume around 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. Again, we see the elite runners, the faster finishers are consuming on average 70 grams of carbohydrate per hour. And then the rest of the pack, the rest of the runners tend to be consuming around 30 grams of carbohydrate per hour, but we've seen that they're carrying 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. So again, just not really having potentially a plan-specific strategy of making sure that we're eating enough during a race. So 30 grams of carbohydrate looks like, so one standard gel tends to be around 25 to 30 grams of carbohydrate. One banana is about 30 grams of carbohydrate. One slice of bread is about 15 grams of carbohydrate. So really look at the foods that you're eating and really make sure that you're practicing eating around 30 to 60 grams per hour of carbohydrate. And again, things like your sports bars, sports products, cereal bars all contain around 30 grams of carbohydrate. So again, people like to think of it in terms of calories, so potentially aiming for 200 to 300 calories per hour. And again, we can include some protein-containing foods in that. We've seen that potentially including protein-containing foods in your race nutrition strategy, so potentially every 2 to 4 hours throughout the race, can actually help offset muscle fatigue or muscle damage and delay time to fatigue, so really support your race performance. And again, protein found these days in many kind of sports bars that we can buy. You can potentially have a protein shake ready to go at one of the checkpoints or in your self-supported kit bag. Yeah, and many kind of race fluids like Perpetuum and other kind of meal replacement foods that people use during a race also contain protein. And then you've got things like branched chain amino acids that you can easily carry within your bag and have those on a regular basis. Again, practice that in your training. Don't try anything new in a race. And then the final thing is people are starting to add in fats. Again, fats are great for adding calories and giving you some energy that we've seen. People who eat more energy are more likely to finish the race. So again, fat, people are turning to these days the trail butters or nut butters, and they'll also come with sugar in them. So again, just a great mix of energy. And again, it's just these types of foods like your protein foods or the fat-rich foods, again, are just flavour changes. So if people get flavour fatigue with the sweet, sugary carbohydrate foods, then foods like your protein shakes or meats and cheeses and salamis or fat-rich foods like your nut butters, again, people tend to find that these go down. And again, it's always a mix of real foods amongst your planned sports products that are going to support your performance.
From the food side, that makes sense. What about for drinking, for water, isotonic, electrolytes sort of side of things? What should we be aiming for with that?
Yeah, so again, around hydration and sodium, I think there's a lot of confusion and people say different things. And with any race nutrition strategy, whether it's food, fluids, and sodium supplements, it's really individual. It's not like potentially running a marathon where we've seen really solid evidence for, a 3-hour performance. We can say eat this, this, and this and be really prescriptive. When it comes to ultra running, trail running, because there's different course profiles, different distances, we'll all run at different times and at different pace, and we all choose to prefer different foods and flavors, then actually everything comes down to the individual and what works well for you. So in terms of hydration, we've seen again that ultra runners typically running 100-mile distances are drinking around 500 mils of fluid per hour. Our hydration needs are really individual, depending on our own individual sweat rates per hour. So how much sweat we lose or how much fluid we lose in the sweat also depends on the race conditions. So how hot it is, how cold it is, and the temperatures can change vastly just in one race. It can be really hot during the day and then really cold in the evening. And again, our hydration requirements will also then be influenced by the pace. So the faster runners or the course profile. So again, if you're running more than fast walking, if you're running, you're working harder, so you're going to be sweating more, which is going to influence how much you need to drink. So lots of things to consider with our hydration requirements. People often like numbers to start with, so I would suggest around start with what you're already doing. So in one of your long runs for training, monitor how much you're drinking per hour. Don't change anything. If you're not drinking anything, start drinking. If you are drinking through a long run, try to monitor how much you're drinking per hour. If you can be reflective of past races and just get a gauge of how much you drank in total and per hour, and then work from there and see if it's sufficient. Looking at around 450 mils per hour, but we've seen people drink as little as 300 mils per hour and up to 750 mils. It's really individual. Again, we can check hydration status during training and day-to-day by looking at our P color, and you can also do pre and post training weights to then determine hydration levels. We've seen in the research and in real life that actually it's acceptable to lose around 3 to 5% weight loss in terms of dehydration within a race. So we seem to have a bit more of an acceptable range of weight loss for ultra running longer distance, as opposed to what we would normally suggest in kind of your mainstream sports like marathons, half marathons, of 2% weight loss causes a performance detriment. Actually, you want a weight loss in ultra running, long trail runs, and it's acceptable to lose up to around 4 to 5% weight loss. And you can simply measure your percentage weight loss in pre and post weight and then calculating the difference. You definitely don't want to be gaining weight during any runs.
So we're talking about 450 to 500 milliliters of fluids, of liquids
Yeah.
an hour. But how do you know when to drink? Is this, do you recommend every 15 minutes, make sure you're having a few sips, or is it, I'm thirsty, is it too late? The rumor of if you're thirsty, it's too late.
Yeah.
What's the optimum strategy?
Yeah, it's a great question. There is a suggestion to drink to thirst. In shorter distances, maybe if you're running for 4 or 5 hours, drinking to thirst might work. You'll be able to carry potentially enough with you and top up regularly. But actually, if you're in a self-supported race or a longer distance race, potentially if checkpoints and aid stations are further apart, you're going to need a plan. Like you're going to need to know how much you're going to drink on a regular basis, and if it's hot, you're going to be sweating more, and you need to be strategic with how much you drink and when. If you're dehydrated, it's going to slow down digestion and blood flow in the gut even more than it already is, just from the sheer impact of training and running and time on feet. So again, have a plan, and it's almost keeping it simple. So drip feed, sip little and often throughout the run. There is a suggestion of maybe aiming for around 150 to 200 mils every 15 to 20 minutes if people like numbers and if people want to work it out a bit more strategically. But I tend to just say, think drip feed, just keep sipping on a regular basis.
Is that the same for food as well? That rather than sort of eating on the half hour, on the hour of eating your 300 calories, and then you're sort of like your stomach feels full, or is it like, you know, just keep nibbling, is it the same with food?
Yep. Again, fantastic. It is about kind of just eating on the go, eating regularly. Think drip feeding. So just taking bitefuls at a time, especially if you struggle to eat or if you don't feel hungry. Again, in your training, practice eating when you don't feel hungry. But actually, when it comes to a race situation, the further we are into a race, the more we tend to struggle to eat, and appetite starts to go. But if you're into a habit of just drip feeding, taking small bites every 15 to 20 minutes, maybe setting a timer on your watch to remind you, especially as we get more tired throughout the second part of the race, we might need a prompt. Again, if you think drip feeding, and aiming for around 1 or 2 snacks per hour. Again, if you can make the most of eating 1 or 2 snacks per hour in the early part of the race, then again, if you just drop down to 1 snack per hour in the second part of the race, and again, drip feeding, taking small bites, eating things that are easy to go down, then actually you're setting yourself up for hopefully a good race.
Are you saying that things that are easy to go down and snacks, and in terms of what people are eating, we talk about the percentage of grams of carbohydrates, but I remember something you mentioned before of always having a happy snack in your back pocket of when you're like from a psychological benefit, not just from an actual performance benefit. And you're running say the UTMB where people are running for 30, 40 hours, 48 hours for the Red Lantern. You know, there's going to be fatigue in what they're eating. So how would you recommend that, managing flavor fatigue, but also using food to as a motivation, as a way to sort of to recover mentally as well as physically?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people who think I'm a dietitian aren't going to recommend chocolate bars and good food to eat. And again, with ultra runs and the longer we are running for, our appetite diminishes. We do get flavour fatigue and struggle to make appropriate choices, and our preferences for food change throughout the race just because we're tired. It might be raining, we might be struggling a bit more than we thought. So yeah, choosing things like pizza, chocolate bars. I've seen a conversation on a forum once about, this emergency pack of having to carry 500 calories, and people are like, oh, I'm going to take a seed bar, I'm like, no, just take chocolate bars, just take something that are going to go down. Snickers, Mars, chocolate peanut M&Ms, like things that you're going to want to eat. And
Haribo.
Yes, Haribo. Anything that's going to give you that psychological boost that's going to get you through that race. Like it's just so important. So tuck it in your bag. And again, I've seen people, obviously it's common that aid stations, people are tucking into pizzas, like great. I mean, that's going to help you finish the race and just give you some happiness whilst you're going round.
Back to the hydration side of things. So we're taking in fluids. What fluids should people be taking in? Water obviously is great, but sodium, isotonics, from a hydration perspective,
Yeah.
where we're looking?
Again, there's quite a lot of confusion around this, and we need to then consider flavour fatigue in that. So actually, we're carrying kind of different hydration systems. The go-to these days is the soft flasks here, and then you've got the flasks with the straws, which are great because it means it's easier for us to drink from and will encourage us to drink. And then some people are using bladders in their vest. Again, there's no one right system to use. It's whatever's right for you and what will encourage you to drink. But in terms of what fluid we should be drinking, again, I would always potentially suggest one water flask, one flask that you add electrolytes to, and then potentially a sports drink. But again, it needs to be a strategy and you need to think this through. So when it comes to sodium requirements, again, it's individual. Men sweat out more sodium than women. Men have higher sweat rates than women. When it's hot, we sweat more and increase in our sodium requirements. And again, it's individual as to how much sodium we're going to need. Again, for numbers, people tend to suggest around 500 to 700 milligrams of sodium per litre of water. So one of your standard electrolyte tablets are of a minimum around 250 milligrams of sodium. Sports drinks tend to be around 50 to 75 milligrams of sodium. So it's thinking about adding between 500 milligrams to 750 milligrams of sodium per litre of fluid. If it's hot, the recommendations are around 300 milligrams to 600 milligrams of sodium per hour. Mm-hmm. So again, it's really working back, looking at how long you're going to be running for, looking at the weather conditions, and then if you can, I would encourage people to get hydration tested, so sweat and sodium losses, so that you can really hone in. The other really important thing is that I see commonly is people are consuming sports products, bars, gels, powders, drinks. They all contain sodium. Companies these days are adding more electrolytes to all kind of sports nutrition foods. So be mindful and be conscious of where all your sodium is coming from. So do the calculations, look at what you ate potentially in the last race, or look at what you're planning to eat and add up all the sodium. And then I would suggest pick two sports nutrition products where you're going to tame your sodium sources from. So maybe that be electrolytes, salt tabs, or a sports drink. And then be specifically strategic as to how much you're then going to drink per hour. And again, people tend to add electrolytes or a sports drink to their soft flasks, and then alternate. So then one becomes water, one becomes electrolyte. The other trick is that with the electrolyte tabs, you can just eat them and then wash them down with water. So then you avoid contaminating your water to avoid flavour fatigue. So again, it's kind of doing a bit of problem solving, finding out how much sodium you're taking on board initially, and not forgetting the foods that we eat. Like a packet of crisps that we might eat on the round has got about 50 milligrams of sodium. A pinch of salt, if you're making up your own sports drink, has about 400 milligrams of sodium. You know, if you're eating a pizza, if you're drinking a meal replacement steak like Perpetuum, then they've all got sodium in. So just think about where the sodium's coming from. Often people have a scattergun approach, and then the sodium can then potentially lead to adverse reactions, and then we're overdoing it. So just, again, be a bit strategic.
On that, so I mean, you said about testing and doing sweat tests and hydration tests is useful, but if we wanted to do a test at home, I mean, what are the symptoms if I'm low on salt? And then you said also, what if we're overdoing salt? What's the other way? So like, if we're experimenting on our training runs, what is a sign that I've got too low a salt content, and what's a sign I've taken too much?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because we kind of respond differently. Potentially swelling of the limbs could be either too much salt or not enough salt, or potentially been running for a long time. We do tend to get edema at the end of our limbs anyway, but I again would, if I was working with you on an individual basis, I'd look at what you're already consuming, and then we'd look at the weather, we'd look at the distances, and we'd certainly add in a minimum amount of sodium to begin with. But some of the symptoms might be thirst would be one of them, again, for hydration, potentially limb swelling, hand swelling, if you had any stomach issues like nausea, nausea might be a common one, and potentially too much sodium. I would... there's no one set defined problem. If we're under or over, it's trying to kind of build the whole picture. But again, hand swelling and things like that could be either over hydration, not enough sodium.
Do you find cramps and those sort of things can be?
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, cramps, we've seen in the research that actually cramps are more related to fatigue of the muscle.
Okay.
So if we're running for a long distance and we're not used to running that long distance, we're more likely to experience fatigue, and the cramps happen localized. So potentially if cramping was due to sodium loss, we'd probably cramp all over. But actually what we have seen in the heat, we get cramps that are associated with sodium loss. Cramping in the heat. So if you're cramping in the heat, yes, if you're out running and you're experiencing cramping on a regular basis, then absolutely let's get some salt in and see if that then has a positive influence. But in terms of the rest of the time cramping, it tends to be more related to fatigue of that muscle rather than anything else. So maybe do a bit more training on that area.
Okay. You mentioned that as a consequence or a symptom of too much salt can be nausea and stomach issues. And I think this is something really common, especially in ultra running, where we all know someone, and we've all probably had it, where we've had stomach issues during a race, whether that's full-blown nausea and vomiting to all sorts of unpleasantness. What's causing this, and how can we better prepare ourselves to avoid it?
Yeah, stomach issues are not fun, and they're not pretty, and they are a challenge for up to over 40% of runners in races. And what we've seen actually is elite runners, the top finishers, who are used to racing, used to eating on the go, and have well-practiced nutrition strategies experience less stomach issues. So that tells us one thing: actually practice your race nutrition strategy, get used to racing. Again, when we're racing, we're tending to go at a quicker pace than what we are when we're training. The adrenaline carries us. Maybe we're carried by the pack and the excitement of in a run. So stomach issues are quite common for many different reasons, and often we can set off too fast, and then the pace of that just means that blood flow is instantly diverted from our stomach, and we're just trying to catch up and get our system switched on using more carbohydrate energy stores. And then at the same time, then we might start to try and eat, and with a mix of adrenaline and blood flow diverted from our stomach, we're setting up ourselves early on for stomach issues. Not starting hydrated in a race is another one. Again, if we're dehydrated, and when we become dehydrated through the race, which is a given because we're potentially not going to be able to drink enough and potentially to keep up. If we are generally dehydrated, again, that diverts even more blood flow away from the stomach. And then that slows and impairs digestion. And we've seen in the research and in the field that just from the sheer physiological changes that happen over a long period of time, we really hammer the system. Like our body really suffers during ultra runs. So again, is what we call ischemia of the gut. So it just starts to do a bit of damage and wear and tear to our gut. So then that obviously is going to have an implication on the digestion process and really start to slow everything down. And we've just seen some kind of hormonal changes within the gut and the digestive system that can really lend us to feel nauseous and have stomach issues. So sometimes it's just something that we're going to have to either deal with, or we can offset just by either getting used to racing and practicing our race nutrition strategies. But there are specific gut training strategies that you can do in training.
Okay. And say it's too late, we're in a race, we've got gut issues. Are there strategies sort of to fend it off, apart from we don't want to drop, we want to keep going? Like, how is there a magic pill or something you can take to sort of get everything sorted, or where are you at if you end up in this situation?
Yeah, again, if it's something that's happening commonly in a race, if you're used to racing and it's something that's coming up at the same time, again, with ultra runners I've worked with, there's often a pattern to it. So the same things are happening. So maybe the second part of the race we're feeling nauseous, or the second part of the race we're getting bloating and stomach cramps. If that does happen during a race, first slow down and just really cut down the pace. Or I wouldn't necessarily suggest to stop, but if you need to, stop and just let things settle. And the other thing that you can do, potentially ginger might settle the stomach. Again, practice this in training because of the taste. But there's some sports products, just naming one off the top of my head, there's a company called Active Root that produce a ginger sports drink that potentially can help just reduce nauseous. And the other thing, if you are really struggling but trying to get to the end, then just simply a carbohydrate mouth rinse. So taking a gel, your Cliff Shot blocks or a sports drink and just swilling it round your mouth for at least 10 to 15, well, 5 to 10 seconds as you can manage, and then spit it out, because that will give you a stimulatory effect. It'll give you a bit of a boost of energy, and might just help get you through the last part of the race. So you can actually offset stomach issues, really alleviate your stomach issues that happen during a race by doing gut training strategies in training, and these can take up to as little as 2 weeks to have an effect. So you can actually do this quite close to your race. So the one thing you can do is simply eat a meal and then go out for your training run. So have breakfast, then go for a run. So you're literally running with food still sat in your stomach. Obviously it's going to be a low intensity run. Don't go out fast, do a hill session, because you'll see your breakfast. So yeah, that can be practiced at least once a week in the run up to a race. The other thing that you can do is get used to eating carbohydrate on the go. We've seen that you can train the gut to absorb more carbohydrate, but then by doing that, you're also increasing the availability of carbohydrate and the energy to our muscles. So it's doing a double thing. So again, gut training strategies for carbohydrates. So one of them is that in an hour's training run, again, similar to running just after breakfast, eat something at 0 minutes before you go. So whether that's your breakfast, a banana, or a gel, so ideally around 30 grams of carbohydrate. Then at 20 minutes, eat another 30 grams of carbohydrates, so whether that's a gel would be easier, or some Cliff Shot blocks. And then again, another 30 grams of carbohydrate at 40 minutes. So within that hour, you're being really aggressive with adding carbohydrate. But we've seen in the research and the evidence and in the field that actually really our gut develops more receptors to be able to digest carbohydrate and absorb it. And that really eliminates and reduces stomach issues during races. And again, that can be practiced 2 to 3 weeks run up, but doing it on a regular basis. So at least each of those sessions once a week. And then the other obvious one is in your longer runs, be aggressive and practice your race nutrition strategy. All of those really help alleviate stomach issues. People don't do it enough. And it's trying to be a bit more aggressive with it. As we've seen in the top finishers, the elite runners, they're so used to eating on the go. They're so used to practicing their race nutrition strategies. Stomach issues for the top end of the pack are less.
And with social media, with advice everywhere, with experts that we don't know if they're necessarily experts, there's lots of advice out there. There's lots of words of wisdom that people believe and take on. I mean, do you have one that you really can't stand, that you're like, this is just wrong, that people keep saying, oh, how to approach something like nutrition or hydration? You're like, this just doesn't work. I mean, like ginger, you're quite careful to say ginger might work. I hear a lot of people like, oh, ginger's what cures all ailments, So is there anything that you're like, just don't worry about that one?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few bugbears. But generally, it's really individual, and there's no one person I've worked with, an ultra runner, whether they're elite or whether they're people that are bringing up the rear of the pack. Everybody's nutrition strategy is different, and what works for one person does not work for the other person. One size does not fit all. But if you're asking me for one of my general bugbears, is the whole ketogenic diet, race on fat approach. I'm allowed to say that as I'm doing my PhD, looking at low-fat diets, high-fat diets in ultra runners, but actually I'm trying to find out whether actually a ketogenic diet does influence ultra running performance for the better. So actually, does consuming a high-fat diet leading into a race influence performance? But actually, at the moment, we haven't seen that it has. And to suggest to people, there's quite a lot of confusion around it, and it needs to be strategic. It needs to be done really carefully. It's not something that you can just go out and do. And for most people, it's about eating enough calories and getting the food down in a race that's going to support your race. So when we hear things about, ketogenic diet, high-fat diet is the way to go, actually, we've seen that if you're eating fat in a race, that can cause big stomach issues. Fat's just really hard to digest. And also, if we're eating fat foods during a race, things like your nut butters and your nuts and seeds, and people that have, people that eat avocados, then actually it takes 2 to 3 hours for that fat to digest, for you then to be used as an energy source. So actually, and I've spoken to many of elite ultra runners who choose to follow a ketogenic diet, which is absolutely fine. Not one size fits all. Some people respond really well to it. But actually, it's not the be-all and end-all. We don't need to be doing this, eating a high-fat diet to be good at ultra running. We've seen in the research that, world-class ultra runners eat high-carb diets, and then there's also world-class ultra runners who report to be eating high-fat diets who are doing equally as well. But then if you look at their race nutrition strategies, they're eating carbs. They're still eating carbohydrate during a race. So that's the confusion. People think, oh, high-fat diet, going to eat fat during a race. And it's just like, you're going to struggle. Everybody eats carbohydrate during a race.
Well, thank you. I think this has been, there's a lot to learn, a lot to take away from this, and a lot to practice before our races. We're in the middle of the season, but as Rebecca said, it's never too late to take on the advice and to do some gut training, to do some preparation, especially for the bigger races that we've got coming up at the end of the month. This is our first speaker series here in Chamonix, and we will be having 3 more over the course of August. With next week, we're being joined by Brazilian ultra runner and the North Face global athlete, Fernanda Maciel, who is going to be talking to us about racing around the world. She's got an incredible CV, having raced and run in the most beautiful and stunning environments you'll ever have seen. So do join us next week, where we'll be with Fernanda. For now, thank you very much, and see you on the trails.